Okay, very official. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So I want to go ahead and say good evening and welcome. Thank you everyone for coming tonight to our meeting on the building project. I would like to welcome you and thank you for spending your evening with us and showing an interest in our project. My name is Kate Buckson and I am the library's executive director. And before we begin, I do just want to inform you that this evening's forum is being recorded, so it will be shared on our website following the meeting for those who could not attend in real time. And that will be on our building project page, which we'll share our URL a little later in case you are not aware. So on our first slide we have up here with our agenda, I would like to draw your attention to just the way that the evening is set up so you know what to expect. I will start us off with a brief overview of some of the major decisions and actions taken by the board since 2015 as it relates to the building project. After that, you will meet Megan Harte and Jamie Zora, the architects who have been working with us to understand the full scope of work that needs to be done on the building, and also the person who has spent many hours with people in our community and staff. Actually, I think both of you have, Jamie and Megan, but specifically Megan has spent a lot of time going over survey results and many interviews conducted with people in our community and different community groups to see what the interests are in the building and what they would like to see happen in the future at the library. So she'll be going over those findings and also speaking briefly about the design of our building, the significance of the architecture, and then finally some recommendations for what should be done to help rectify some of the issues we're having here in the building. So that's the setup. It'll come back to me to talk a little bit about financing after that, and then we'll have time for questions. So I want to let all of you know the way questions will work this evening. This is a webinar platform. So for those of you who have used Zoom for meetings, this is a little different. So take a minute to get yourself familiarized if you're not with the screen, and that Q&A feature that you see is going to be the best way to ask your questions tonight. I will be monitoring those when I'm not speaking, and also we have a staff member, Gabe, who is going to be monitoring those as well. So please go ahead and type your questions into there and we will be sure to get back to you. So the goal for tonight is really just to inform all of you of this journey that the board has been on for the last several years and to share our enthusiasm for the next steps of this project. We hope that you find all this information helpful and useful and that you'll share in our excitement of the future of this library. And joining me tonight, we have several people I'd like to introduce. So they've been working on this project for the last 6 months at least, and also representing the library tonight besides myself is Gabe Oppenheim, who is our adult services director and also has been at the library for almost as long as it's been in this location. So he's a great resource and will be answering questions tonight. But we have from Bolt, our construction management service, Brad Y. And Brad, if you want to unmute and just say hello, feel free at this time.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me.
So thanks for being here, Brad.
Yeah.
And then I want to introduce also Megan Harte and Jamie Zora, who are the architects from 845 Design Group. And they will be going over a lot of the really exciting fun stuff tonight, giving us a little more of an idea of the scope of the project. So both can say hi or just wait because you're coming up next.
Hi, all. Glad to be here.
Good evening.
Thanks for being here. So, all right, let's get started. Let me figure out how to advance the slide here. There we go. So digging into our content for tonight, we're going to begin by talking a little bit about the process that the library has gone through so far to find out about everything going on with the building and what we need to do to be good stewards of this community's investment in the library. So back in 2014, the staff noticed that we were having some water coming into the building pretty regularly when there was a rainstorm, and several areas of the building were sustaining damage to drywall. Rust was forming on metal surfaces, and there was other evidence of water infiltration that could not be ignored. So the board determined it would be wise to do a thorough investigative study of the problem, and Kluber architects and engineers were hired to perform that study in 2015. Kluber focused on examining evidence of water infiltration and noting the extent of damage to the facade. So in a 175-page report issued to the board in the summer of 2015, Kluber explained that damage was extensive and would require a replacement of much of our east and west walls. They were also brought in a second time to do a little more invasive testing of the clerestory windows, and noted that there was some issues in the north and south elevations, though not as many. So we won't spend too much time talking about all of those issues tonight. They have been pretty thoroughly documented on our website. So if you visit lplibrary.org and click on the top menu bar on building project, you will have access to all of the reports that have been done to this point regarding the library building, including that very robust Kluber report on water investigation. So once we knew how extensive and expensive the repairs were going to be, the board determined that we really needed more information before spending money to fix these issues. So the next part of our process, following the revelation of those structural damage issues, was to determine what other maintenance issues we could expect in the coming years and get a full scope of what was going to be needed to help correct some of the problems in our building. We really never want those things to be a surprise. We knew pretty well what was going on with our east and west walls, but we didn't know about the rest of the building. So the board took some time to really thoroughly investigate those issues and determine what other, importantly, funds were going to be needed to help correct those issues in the coming years. So in 2016, the board interviewed and hired Studio GC architects to complete a facility needs assessment. So our building has been around for 30 years, as some of you may know, and a lot has changed in 30 years. So Studio GC did the full scope of maintenance issues along with a really thorough service analysis where we considered what our community wanted in a modern library and how we could best meet those needs and if we were meeting those needs with our current structure and setup and organization. So that was presented to the board in 2016. And then in 2017 and 18, we held a couple of community meetings to communicate to the public those building problems we were experiencing, as well as these new reports on ways that we could improve our service model. A master facility plan was then created in 2018 and approved by the board, and that laid out the steps that the board would take leading up to our groundbreaking day of starting these repairs that are so needed. So it was a multi-year process that the board had determined they would take step by step to get to the point where we're ready to start construction. So in 2020, Bolt was hired as the construction management firm to help with the project. And that was done a little ahead of schedule because our trustees noted that with all of the closures due to COVID, it had been maybe a really good opportunity for us to look at bringing in some experts, getting this work started a little bit early and taking advantage of some of the downtime that we had in terms of not having patrons in the building. So we did do that and hired Bolt. And then Bolt helped us to legally and responsibly obtain the most qualified architect for the project. So in January of 2021, the board officially selected 845 Design Group to serve as lead architect of this project. So that's a little bit of the background. And at this time, I'm going to hand things over to Megan, and she's going to talk to us about a lot of very exciting things. I'll let her do that.
Great. Thank you, Kate. Hi, all. Just to give a brief overview of kind of the first steps that we had as far as our design process goes. You know, we were in a position where we had all of this really great information done by previous firms and previous architects, but we need to kind of dig a little bit deeper and kind of do our own due diligence. So some of the things that we did in the beginning phases was just an information gathering phase. And so these are just the simple parameters. Some of you may have seen the survey that was issued earlier this year, but we conducted surveys with patrons, staff, and community partners. And we also conducted interviews with the board of directors, the facilities team for the library, each department head, patrons, as well as other adjacent groups to the library, like Friends of the Library and Interfaith. We had a great response to the surveys, over 200 patron responses, which is excellent. And we really learned a lot through the surveys, as well as the interviews that we conducted with everyone. So go ahead, Kate. So this is a little bit difficult to read, but this was kind of just a really high level overview of what we heard on the patron surveys. The average age of the respondent was in their mid 50s. frequency of visits, about half the people that responded were coming to the library on a weekly basis, and about 42% coming on a monthly basis. And mostly people came to the library to browse stacks, and over half the people came for programming. And so we know some of this is challenging to kind of gauge because we were doing this in the middle of a pandemic. And so we were asking the question before, kind of before COVID, what people's habits were regarding the library. Some of the things that we heard about the library building that people really love is the openness, the natural light, the second floor, views to the park, the beautiful barrel vault ceiling, and just the overall sense of scale and space on the second floor of the library. Go ahead, Kate. So this is our interview findings across the board from all the different groups of people that we interviewed. You can see we've got directors, board of directors, staff, patrons, friends of the library, as well as community partners. And what's really great about this diagram is that there's a lot of common themes running through all these different groups. So while there's a lot of users of the building, there's a lot of stakeholders, they generally all want the same thing, which helps make our job a little bit easier. Some of the top items that we heard about was more meeting space, resolving some of the noise issues around the open staircase that's in the building, keeping the open feeling that's on the second floor there, and the natural light. People seem to really embrace kind of that second floor feeling and the great light that's available in the building. So that kind of brings us to examining, kind of the start of the design process here. And one thing that I just want to draw everybody's attention to is just the library mission statement that's on the front doors to the library building, where it says the LaGrange Park Library is a welcoming and inclusive community center connecting residents to informational, cultural, and educational resources. And this is important, not only from an organizational standpoint, but also as we get into the design, we want to make sure that we're helping the library meet their mission and be able to support the community in the way that they want to. And so as we move forward here, if you want to go to the next slide, Kate. We need to take kind of a little bit of a path down architectural history lane here. And I just want to quickly kind of go over a little bit of architectural history because it gives some context to the background of the library building and why it looks the way it does and why it functions the way it does. So the library building is actually a postmodern architectural style. And most people aren't real familiar with that term, but most people have heard of modernism when it comes to architectural history. And modernism was kind of this very clean line aesthetic where we use very simple but industrial materials, lots of steel, lots of glass, very minimal detail. And it was often dependent on a very wealthy client that would build this type of building. It was also a very restrictive style. There wasn't a lot of decoration or embellishment of buildings. It was very simple and classic. And the art was really in the materials that were being used for the building. This building at the library is not a modern building. It's rather postmodern. Which if you want to go to the next slide. So postmodern was a movement that was really in response to modernism. And it was post-war where there's new cultural changes happening, there's new political possibilities, there's pop art, there's pop music, there's the civil rights movement, there's the women's rights movement. And it was just a really kind of chaotic time. And this style of architecture was in response to that. And rather than being able to solve all of the problems of the world, it was kind of just reveling in all of the complexities that were going on at the time. And so you kind of get these really funky shapes and kind of this really true to nature building type. One of the architects of this movement is Robert Venturi, and he wrote a very successful book about learning from Las Vegas. Las Vegas is a common place for postmodern architecture. You'll see it in the casinos, where it's a very obvious, blatant statement about what the building is. So what does that mean for LaGrange Park Library? The building that exists now for the library is actually styled after an open book. You can see kind of the diagram of the blue book on the screen right there. So the spine of the building, the barrel vault is kind of replicating the spine of the book, and the kind of two open covers are the slanted roofs that you see. So I think this actually lends itself to a really successful story of the building, because it kind of harkens back to the mission statement. So, we have this open book building that relates really well to all are welcome, which is really part of the inclusiveness of the library's mission statement. So our goal design-wise, and when we're looking at making repairs to the building enclosure, is to not make this building something it's not. It's not going to be a modern farmhouse building. It's not going to be a modern building, but really make it the best postmodern building that we can. And also keeping in mind that, while the style may not be popular, it might not be everybody's favorite, it is important style in architectural history, and the building will actually be available, eligible for landmark status in about 18 years. So, so the design approach we're taking with this is that fixing the repairs and also enhancing the character that exists within the building and really making it just a really beautiful example of postmodern architecture. So with that, we started looking at the materials to be used to repair the building. We did a lot of research. The system that's currently failing on the building, kind of that light yellowish green color you see on the building, is called EIFS, which stands for Exterior Insulation Finish System. And it's a very cost-effective, economical product that kind of erupted in the 1980s and was the original product specified for the building. It's still used today. However, the technology and the application of that material is vastly different than it was in the 80s. It's a much better system today. And the most important part of it is that the systems today that get installed using EIFS are drainable, which means if water gets behind the product, there's a way for it to get out. And that's really the challenge with the building right now, is that the water can't get out. So water's getting trapped behind that material and causing problems. So we're looking at a drainable EIFS system. And we also looked at a metal panel system. You can kind of see here just a high level cost wise, a metal panel system is double the cost of EIFS. The other thing is that the EIFS system is a complete system that gets warrantied. So it's the exterior material, it's the insulation, it's the air barrier. It's all applied and has a single warranty as a system. Whereas if we were to go to another system like metal panel, you've got the warranty for metal panel, you've got the warranty for the insulation, you've got the warranty for the air barrier. They're all separate and much more difficult to track down if there's ever an issue that you need to address with the warranty. And you can kind of see from the two pictures there, there's just, with both materials, there's really a wide range of aesthetic opportunities with each one. But right now the design team is leading towards a drainable EIFS system for the replacement of those walls. Now I'm just going to kind of go through the building elevation by elevation, starting with the east elevation and kind of the scope of work that we're looking at for this side of the building. This is the elevation that faces Memorial Park. And this is kind of the elevation that started it all. This one is in the worst shape as far as water entering the building. So what we would do is remove all of the EIFS wall system and replace it with a more modern, the drainable EIFS system that I had just mentioned. Also, all of the glazing that's in the curtain, the barrel vault, we call that curtain wall glazing. And that's the tall glazing that you see in kind of the center of the library there, forming the spine of the book, if you will. So we would remove all of that. The mullions included. The mullions are the pieces of metal that divide the panes of glass. All of that would come out. That's all one system that needs to be removed. Additionally, the ribbon windows. The ribbon windows are the windows that are on the EIFS wall that are kind of flanking the barrel vault. Most people know them because they're the blue framed windows. So those would get replaced as part of this project as well. We would also have a new entry door to the patio space. We would also add new insulation and column covers at the blue columns. And these are the two large columns that you see in the photograph down below that are flanking the barrel vault. You'll see in further photographs, there's some corrosion and rust happening at the base of them that we really just need to kind of address now so there's no further damage to them, as well as insulate them to help alleviate some of the water issues that we're having in the building. We would also propose a new color scheme, which we'll talk a little bit about in a couple of slides, but something that's easy to maintain and that's going to last. We would also add a new railing at the existing patio to kind of soften that space and update it, and possibly consider expanding that patio to be in front of the barrel vault. Kind of where that photograph is taken. There's some beautiful park benches there right now under some trees, but there's really no paved area, it's just kind of grass. So potentially expanding that space. And go ahead to the next slide. So the north elevation here, we would remove the EIFS system, and it's mostly on the clear story part of the building, which are those windows that are up high, kind of where you see those diamond shapes. So we would remove that and replace that system. We would also remove the clear story windows themselves. Again, those kind of have the blue window frame to them. So those would come out and be replaced. Again, we'd have the new color scheme that kind of tied everything together, as well as a new ramp and railing wall. Something else we're looking at is just kind of some educational signage at the bioswale on this elevation. Excuse me. On the south elevation, it's very much the same, where we would replace the clear story windows and the EIFS system as well. Our findings on the masonry, which is the gray kind of block that you see, that's where the little square windows are at on the north and south side. We would really just clean and seal that masonry. It's in good shape, and it's really just more of a maintenance item than a full replacement needed for that component of the building. And then we get to the west elevation, which is kind of the first impression of the library. So on this elevation here, we're looking again at kind of replacing that barrel vaults of glazing in the middle there, addressing the canopy. The canopy will need to be removed to replace the EIFS anyway, but also, you know, it's an opportunity for us to really create a welcoming first impression for the library. We would also, at the blue columns here, we would insulate those and reclad those so that they're more durable and going to last. We're exploring opportunities for a new book drop location. Right now, the book drop is on the very front of the building. We're really just trying to kind of declutter this front of the building here and again, make it more welcoming and easy to access as you enter the space. In order to protect the structure, most of the corrosion that we're seeing as far as the structure is concerned is at this location, at the front door, at the bottom of those blue columns. And that's common when we've got things like road salt and the like kind of eating away at the steel for that. So we would want to introduce a planter to kind of protect the bottom of those columns so that further damage doesn't occur. And then with that, we would tie that into the new ramp and railing system that we had mentioned. The current system is got some evidence of it needs some maintenance and repair. It's also failing in some areas too. So we would want to look at that as part of this. We would relocate the flagpole to the center parking island. Again, just trying to reduce the clutter at the front door and create a thoughtful, clean approach to the entry of the building. So as we talk about this west elevation, you know, one of the things that our team was tasked with is just first impressions and creating a welcoming space for folks as they enter the building. So we start to look at some of the current geometry of the building and this idea of being an open book. And so some of the imagery that you see on the right here is literally an open book. So if we go to the next page, it kind of inspired our canopy design. Excuse me, where we're literally kind of taking a curled book page and kind of turning it into the new front canopy for the library. This would also give the opportunity to add some signage. We kind of have a red bookmark, if you will, kind of sticking out above those front doors to welcome people and just identify where the entry is to the building. Here you can also see that where we've introduced kind of that planter at the base of the building to help protect those two columns, as well as tying it into a new planter wall that would conceal the ramp to the building. And this is very much a study model for us. So I don't want to alarm anybody that this is it, this is the final thing. But this is gonna kind of helping us as we work through. There's a lot of geometry on the building. There's a lot going on, and we just want to look at it, from all angles and make sure we explore all options. If you go to the next slide, Kate. One of the things we're also looking at too, as we're designing this front canopy and thinking about the flow of the building and how people are going to access it, is the exterior color palette. So we have a couple of constants within the building that are going to remain, and we have some opportunities for change with some of the materials that need to be replaced. So over here on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see we do have the gray bricks that were remaining, as well as the green and the yellow glazed block that we have. At the west elevation, we've got the green and glazed brick that kind of forms the diamond pattern on the front of the building. And then we've got the roofing, the barrel vault roofing, the low slope roofing, all of that would remain. On the right-hand side, we've got what we're calling opportunities for change. And a lot of this is materials that need to be replaced because they're failing or they're aging, or they're just kind of, they're prohibiting work from being done on the things that need to be repaired. So we've got the clear story windows, we've got the EIFS up at the clear story level. We've got the ramp that's on the north elevation there, where you can kind of see chunks of concrete are missing out of it. We've got the east elevation, where I think most everybody knows that's where most of the problems are at with the water infiltration. And then some corrosion happening at the front elevation on the west side. So all of those are opportunities for us to make a change with the building as we consider the enclosure repairs. So with that, we're trying to embrace the postmodernism of the building, but also make it easy to maintain and make it a place that is in harmony with the rest of the building. And so in doing that, we're taking some color cues out of the beautiful mural that's on the second floor of the building that you can see there on the left-hand side. And then, kind of realizing the fact that we're going to have to be mindful that some of these other materials are staying and making that work with anything new that we propose. So on the right-hand side, you'll kind of see we've done more of a monochromatic scheme. So we have some bright colors, but they're kind of in the green and grayish tones, so that we can kind of neutralize the building, but also have an opportunity for some pops of color and some fun. So that darker green color that you see could be a potential color that we might do for the two columns that flank the barrel vault on each side. That brick pattern that you see could be the masonry that's used for the planter. That color chip you see that says Stowe underneath it would be the new color for the EIFS. And then the other two squares of color that you see that say reflected color, transmitted color, that would be the color of the new glazing. And we're really trying to neutralize the glazing and keep it a little bit more modern looking. We won't have any blue mullions on this project. We're going to try and neutralize that. But then also kind of, we tucked this little red color in here too, because we do believe that, the building should remain fun and kind of true to its postmodernism itself. And tucking a red or a bright yellow is a fun way to identify entries and architectural cues for folks using the building. Great. I'm going to turn it back over to Kate, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Megan. It is great to hear all of the exciting things that we have in store for our future. But first, I want to go over what I think is a pretty burning question in the community, and that is how we are going to finance the project. So a question that has been asked quite a bit so far is, will there be a referendum? So I am here to answer that question. If you have not seen that on our website already under the FAQs, that the library board has not chosen to go to referendum for funding. We have spent the last several years cutting costs from our budget and saving as much money as possible, so that we are now at a point where we have over $1.5 million in our capital project fund. And this money can be used for future building improvements and is a considerable amount of money, but it's not quite enough to finance this entire project. So To help determine our best options for financing the project, the library worked with Meristem Financial Advisors, who specialize in library finance and have a long history of successful bond issuance. So based on our current funding status, we are able to borrow the remaining funds needed to complete the project and then to repay the bonds at a low interest rate over a period of years. So this process does take several months, but the library has begun that already and anticipates receiving the bond proceeds within the next 12 weeks so that we will be able to pay all associated costs with the building project to start as early as this summer. So there's been a lot of information shared this evening. I do want to take a moment before we move on to questions to thank also our library board and our especially facility committee, which consists of library board president Lori Whitman, as well as trustee Allison Demas O'Brien. Gabe Oppenheim, who I mentioned, works here at the library, has also been on that committee, as well as Aaron Wheeler, our facility coordinator, and myself. And they've put in some extra time and energy into being sort of the initial point of entry for all the information coming in from architects and from Bolt about the library project. And we just really appreciate the time that they have put into this and to help make this a reality over the last several months as we've been kicking it into high gear. So at this point, I do want to invite questions. As I mentioned, there is a Q&A that everyone can type questions into. So please feel free to utilize that and we can move into the question and answer period of the evening. We'll just wait for those to start rolling in. I'm gonna actually stop sharing the screen here so I can see them better. So anyone has a question? Here we go. What makes the new EIFS system better than the existing one? The gutter or drainage, question mark?
So the drainage by far. So the EIFS system that's currently installed on the building is called a barrier system, which means that water, it was designed so that water would not penetrate the system at all. So they didn't have to worry about drainage. That doesn't happen. Water will win always. So when water gets behind a barrier system, it gets trapped. And that's what causes the damage to the materials behind it. So the new EIFS system is a drainable system. So there's a drainage mat installed behind the material so that when water does get through that first layer, there's a very clear path for it to take back out to the building.
Anything to add, Brad? That's okay if there's not.
That's a great explanation.
Okay, good. The next question is, what is the warranty on the new EIFS system versus the old one?
I don't know what the warranty is on the current EIFS. I know it's likely not under warranty anymore, but the new EIFS system would be a 15-year warranty.
Keep those questions coming if you have any. Thank you so far for those two. In the meantime, maybe while people are typing, I will mention that I know there's been a lot of question about when the project will start and, if we can expect closures and just how this will impact operations. So I just want to continue to remind everyone that the best place for information that is most current really is our website. And as soon as the library is aware of the construction schedule, as soon as we know what any closures, if any, will occur and how services will be impacted, we will absolutely let the public know. We will post that information and make it as widely available as possible. So we would encourage all of you to head over to our website, to sign up for our e-newsletter, to follow us on social media, and do all those things so that you can make sure your bases are covered to find out about our operations during construction. Any other questions? Megan, you are just so thorough. I will say that as we move forward in the process, we do anticipate, if there's a need for another meeting, we will absolutely have one. We want to do our best to keep the community informed about this process and to keep things moving forward in a transparent way and give everyone the opportunity to see what we have planned. So we hope that you're excited. We hope that you're enthusiastic about this project and ready to see this issue corrected once and for all, just as we are. So I do want to thank you all for coming. It's only been 37 minutes. We can wait another minute or two and see if anyone else wants to ask a question. We would be happy to answer. We also have staff here that can answer questions. Primarily, questions can be directed my way, or anyone can also come to board meetings. They are open to the public, and the third Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. You're all welcome there. So had something come in. Thank you for the update. Good history of building and explanation of the process being followed. Thank you. We appreciate you coming and giving us your time tonight. So thank you for being here. Anyone else? Here we go. What about the interior? There we go. I was waiting for that one. Thank you. So I can speak briefly to that, and then maybe we can have answers from either Brad or Megan too. But the interior is something we absolutely would love to update as funds allow. We recognize that there are some structural issues certainly that should take priority so that we can ensure that the libraries, that the community's investment in the library is maintained for years to come, and that there aren't considerable structural issues in the future. However, Megan or Brad, if you want to talk about any of the potential for interior projects this phase, please feel free.
Sure, I can chime in here. So some of the interior stuff that interior projects that we would be considering are things that were on that matrix of kind of the common threads between all of the different groups that we had talked to and interviewed. One of the things on that list that I didn't mention during that slide was the restrooms. Restrooms being upgraded in the current location, but also adding a restroom on the ground floor of the building because there currently isn't one. So that's definitely something that we're looking at and trying to fit into the project budget. And then I think an overall aesthetic update, when we talk about paint and flooring, and we want the interior to match the beautiful exterior that's going to happen. And so while also addressing some of the needs and wants that we learned about, meeting rooms, makerspace, that all seems to be a very desirable thing across kind of all of the groups that we talked about. So what we've talked to the library about too is kind of creating a phased approach, depending, how budget plays out and how we procure, future funding for any kind of grants or anything like that, but, create almost a master plan for the library. So maybe it won't be in the first phase, but maybe down the road, we can incorporate those changes in future funding opportunities.
Absolutely. Great. Okay, so we had a question come in about, did the original builders use faulty materials? So probably you guys can't speak exactly to that, but do you have an idea of what might have happened?
I can't say for sure, but, I think just an overall history of EIFS in the 80s, I think at the time it was being installed, people thought they were doing the right thing. It was a new technology, a new way of thinking about things that ultimately didn't work. So I can't say that they were purposefully doing it, but, this isn't the first building built at this time with this material to have these problems.
Yeah, that's absolutely true based on the information, even just that I've heard in of other libraries that were designed even at the same time, the same general time, the late 1980s, and even by the similar architect or the same architect as ours many years ago, and they had the same problems as well. So yeah, we have had the question quite a bit that shouldn't those designers or shouldn't those manufacturers, be responsible for the damage that has occurred. And, unfortunately enough time has passed that any applicable warranties have expired, and even any lawsuits and things like that that have been brought have come and gone, and it's just very difficult at this point to find anyone else who would be at fault that we could potentially hold responsible for that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any intentional harm was done in putting this material in the building originally. I just think that it was also a budget product, so it was probably a low cost alternative to whatever else was being considered, and sometimes that's the decision that moves forward.
Right. So we have another question here. How will new meeting spaces be created or carved out inside? Will they be on all levels, and where will there be study rooms? So that is a great question. It's one that Megan heard a lot, probably she would confirm during her interviews with the community and the surveys that were answered. And I can say it's one that we hear frequently here in the library, people coming in and asking for private rooms. And, we really anticipate with our American workforce, many of them now working from home permanently, that there will be an increased desire for private rooms for people to work. So we do have that on the wish list. It is something that we absolutely hope to have in future phases, as a fixture of our library, serving the community in that way. It's been a concern and a question for years, and I think that will only increase.
Yeah, and I'll just add to, I don't know that we have a location identified yet for those purposes, but what we're trying to do is organize the library by noise level, realizing that the children's department and the basement is typically the loudest part of the building, and working up from there. So potentially, incorporating those rooms onto the second floor where it tends to be a little bit quieter was things we're looking at.
Absolutely. I had a great comment come in from Gabe. Gabe, I'm happy to say this, or you can unmute, but he is recalling that when our building was originally designed and constructed, that east wall that faces Memorial Park was originally intended to be a temporary wall. So that also could be part of the reason that the product was selected, and that there wasn't as much of a concern for installation and things like that being done, for a long-term solution, because the design from what we know was intended to be extended at some point to increase the size of the library. So that is not something that we're considering at this time. It has not, in the 30 years since the library was built, been something that was done even during previous renovations that have occurred. So that is another really good point. So thank you, Gabe. Another one, when do you think it will be finished? So I will say, and that does depend certainly on when it starts, when it will be finished, but maybe either Brad or Megan, you can speak to, some of these big things that you're talking about doing on the east and west elevations, replacement of whole window systems, how long of a project can we expect that to be? Does it depend on material availability? Just maybe kind of inform us on some of that.
Sure. Brad, do you want to take that one, or you want me to chime in?
Yeah, sure. No, I can get started with that. So yeah, in terms of overall duration for construction, really taking a look at the enclosure system and the replacements on each of the elevations, definitely looking at trying to phase that work. So, tackling one side at a time, obviously being mindful of the front entrance to the building and how we're phasing that. In general, that exterior replacement, just looking at some of the older schedules that we had done initially, kind of like a 3 to 4 month effort to get that exterior enclosure taken care of, depending on how we phase it. And then from there, really the interior build out is really predicated on just how much space we want to occupy at a given time, and trying to minimize, disruptions and the amount of space that's closed. But in terms of like the substantial work on the exterior of the building, kind of that 4-month mark feels right for what we currently have planned.
Yeah, and I'll just add that that's construction time. So we need to finish our documentation of the design here. We need to submit it for permit. It needs to be reviewed. We have to go for public bid. And so, we do have some steps ahead of just, starting the construction process here. But our teams are working together to help expedite that as much as possible.
Great. Thank you both. Well, we've cleared the list of questions that came in, so go ahead and hold it open for another minute or so here for anyone else that wants to chime in. Okay. I don't see anything else coming in right now. So I think I will just close it out with saying thank you to everyone who took the time to come in real time and be our audience and help us get some questions out there, some things that other residents may be wondering about that we could answer for you, and hopefully just give everyone, like I said, a little bit of enthusiasm about this project. We really are excited about modernizing a little bit, not so much that it's modern instead of postmodern, but modernizing our library, giving our residents the library that they deserve, and just making a beautiful space for many years to come. So would anyone else like to say anything before we close out?
Just thank you all to all that listened in, and hopefully you at least walked away knowing what postmodern architecture is. Just a little nugget of info.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us, Megan, Jamie, and Brad. We really appreciate it. And thank you to Gabe for being there to help facilitate some of the technology and make sure questions get answered. And again, thank you to our facility committee for all the time that they've put into this, and our board for being so supportive and getting this project moving. So I think that's it for tonight. We'll go ahead and end the recording and close out this meeting. So everyone, stay safe out there, and good luck getting through 10 days of rain, it looks like in the forecast. So
Thanks, Kate.
All right, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Good night.